Hello, Authority Gap listeners, and welcome to the Authority Gap podcast, the AI-hosted companion series for consulting firm founders and B2B expert-led service firms that want to become easier for buyers to understand, trust, recommend, and choose. In this episode, we're looking at how authority gets built in public. And here's the question: what changes when buyers can see not just what your firm claims, but how your thinking works?
Right.
So we are jumping straight into our deep dive today, and I really want to speak directly to you, the listener, because, well, our mission for this deep dive is to get incredibly practical.
Yeah, very practical.
We want to explore exactly how you can take the brilliant but often entirely hidden expertise locked inside the minds of your firm's partners and transform it into a highly visible, connected authority system.
Which is so crucial right now.
Exactly. And we're going to use real case study lenses to show you the mechanics of how this actually works out in the wild. But to kick us off, I want to establish a mental image.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you're walking down a street and you see a restaurant with a massive sign claiming they have the, best, most innovative food in town.
Right, a huge claim.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a claim. You have zero way to verify it until you sit down, pay, and actually take a bite. But now, contrast that with a restaurant right next door that makes the exact same claim, but they have an entirely open kitchen.
I love this analogy.
Right, because you can see the chefs working. You see the precision of their knife cuts. You see the quality of the raw ingredients. You watch the deliberate care they put into plating.
You see the communication of the whole team.
Yes. Before you have even looked at a menu, your trust in that meal has skyrocketed just because you can see the process. Okay, let's unpack this, because if I'm playing devil's advocate on behalf of a consulting firm founder, I have to ask, does a buyer of high-level B2B consulting services really need to see the kitchen?
Whoa.
I mean, if I have a wall of Ivy League degrees, a sleek website, and a solid list of past clients, isn't claiming I'm an expert enough? Why do I need to expose my firm's internal mechanics?
What's fascinating here is the fundamental nature of what a consulting buyer is actually purchasing, which is, vastly different from buying a tangible product. In high-trust B2B services, buyers are effectively purchasing your judgment long before they have the ability to fully judge the work.
Because they can't test drive it.
Exactly. Think about it from their perspective. They can't test drive a multi-million-dollar digital transformation. They can't put a massive legal risk assessment on a 30-day return policy.
Right. There's no money-back guarantee on that kind of thing.
No, none at all. They are being asked to commit serious budget, time, and crucially, their own internal political capital based almost entirely on a promise.
That is a lot of risk.
It's a massive amount of risk. If all you offer is the claim, the closed kitchen with a nice sign on the door, the buyer carries all that risk. They just have to take your word for it. But when you make your thinking visible, when you actually expose the specific frameworks and mental models you use to arrive at your conclusions, you mitigate that risk.
You prove it beforehand.
Yes. Authority becomes infinitely easier to trust when buyers can actually see the mechanics of the judgment they are about to buy.
I get the theory, but I'm struggling to see how this translates from, a restaurant metaphor to actual professional services. I mean, how do you actually prove your judgment in a way that doesn't just sound like more marketing speak?
To answer that, we need to look at a perfect case study from our source material. And it actually comes from a small environmental nonprofit in Hamilton, Ontario. They were focused on local litter removal.
Wait, hold on. A local nonprofit picking up trash.
Yep.
We're talking about B2B consulting firms selling complex intellectual services. How on earth does a local litter campaign map over to a high-end advisory firm?
I know it sounds like a stretch, but the underlying mechanical challenge is exactly the same. It's about mobilizing a skeptical, busy audience based on a claim that a problem exists and that you're the right entity to solve it.
Okay, I'm listening.
So with litter, it's an obvious problem, theoretically. The nonprofit could have just run a standard awareness campaign, making the broad claim, litter is bad for Hamilton, we need to clean it up, trust us.
Right, the typical poster campaign.
Exactly. But a broad claim doesn't generate public trust or mobilization. The actual granular scale of the issue was basically invisible to the average citizen walking to work. So instead of just shouting their claim louder, they built what they called a street team cleanup.
Okay.
They didn't just ask volunteers to pick up trash and feel good about themselves. They had students and supporters deliberately collect observations. They gathered rigorous data on the most visible sources of the litter.
Oh, wow. So they documented it.
Yes, they organized those observations, categorized the specific types of waste, mapped the geographic hotspots, and then published a detailed report. They showed patterns. They turned scattered, anecdotal local concern into measurable public proof.
Ah, I see the bridge now. They didn't just say they were solving a problem. They actually documented the architecture of the problem itself. They made the invisible visible.
Precisely. They made the evidence visible to schools, local media, community partners. And that is the core takeaway for you listening. Case evidence is significantly more persuasive than broad claims. By making the problem and the analytical process visible, trust increases exponentially.
Because the claims are transformed into evidence.
Right. When people could see the exact scale of the litter problem and understand the data-driven mechanics of the proposed action, they didn't just become vaguely aware of the organization, they became confident in it.
This makes total sense.
And the exact same mechanism applies to a consulting firm. When you expose the thinking, the frameworks, and the observations behind your expertise, you transform from a vendor making a broad claim into an authority providing undeniable evidence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if I'm a founder listening to this, I might say, okay, I buy it. I need to show my thinking and provide evidence. But the immediate knee-jerk reaction in the market is to translate be visible into produce a massive volume of random content.
Oh, absolutely. The content treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. So a firm decides to open the kitchen. On Monday, the CEO posts a think piece about AI in the workplace. On Tuesday, a partner writes a blog about empathetic leadership. On Wednesday, they release a video about supply chain resilience.
Right.
They're technically showing their thinking, but it feels like someone is just throwing random ingredients into a blender. How do you take one strong strategic idea and stretch it across an entire architecture without just creating a chaotic pile of noise for your buyers?
This is a critical distinction, and it's where a lot of really intelligent firms fail. The goal is absolutely not random acts of content. Random acts of content create exposure, sure, but they do not create recognition. The goal is a connected authority architecture. If we look at the source material, there is a brilliant generalized example of a technology risk advisory firm that illustrates this perfectly.
Okay, tell me about them.
Originally, this firm had very broad, highly credible expertise across several complex domains: cyber risk, data privacy, AI governance, product compliance. They did it all.
Let me stop you there, because to a lot of founders, that breadth sounds like a huge competitive advantage.
Right.
You are a one-stop shop. Why wouldn't you want to broadcast all of those capabilities? Isn't narrowing your focus going to cost you clients who might have needed that AI governance piece?
It feels like an advantage internally, yeah. But you have to look at it through the psychology of the buyer. From the buyer's perspective, that breadth makes the firm incredibly hard to place in their mental filing cabinet.
The filing cabinet, right.
If a buyer can't quickly, almost instantly, categorize what specific, urgent problem you are known for solving, they have to do way too much cognitive work to figure out when to call you. And a confused buyer simply doesn't call.
That is such a good point.
So this firm realized they had an authority gap, and they didn't invent new expertise to fill it. Instead, they shifted to a highly focused authority lane. They anchored all of that broad capability, the cyber, the privacy, the AI, under one sharp, undeniable market position, which was legal defensibility for technology risk.
Okay, legal defensibility for technology risk. That immediately shifts the dynamic. It's no longer just a menu of services. It's a specific, highly urgent outcome for a very specific problem. It implies a high-stakes scenario.
Exactly. And they didn't stop at just claiming that lane. They anchored this lane with a named concept, which they developed and called the Friday afternoon trap.
The Friday afternoon trap.
Kitschy. Right.
This concept described the recurring nightmare scenario where executives are forced to make high-stakes technology risk decisions right before a crisis escalates over a weekend. By naming the problem, they gave the buyer specific language for the pain they were already experiencing, but, couldn't quite articulate.
So this is visible thinking in its purest form. They extracted a pattern from their internal judgment and made it a public framework.
Yes.
But how does that one concept actually become an architecture? Let's say I extract my own version of the Friday afternoon trap. What do I do with it? How do I avoid just writing one good white paper that gets read once and then just forgotten?
You've built an ecosystem around it. That single core idea of the Friday afternoon trap became the foundation for multiple interconnected authority assets. It wasn't just one white paper, it became a series of in-depth articles, each analyzing how the trap manifests in different industries, like healthcare versus finance.
It became short video insights where partners dissected real-world news stories through the lens of legal defensibility. It evolved into a comprehensive video library. It became a structured distribution system through a targeted newsletter.
So every single piece of content, no matter the format, functioned like an arrow pointing directly back to that exact same authority lane.
Precisely. It wasn't redundant, it was reinforcing. The content became deeply persuasive because it was tied directly to a clear buyer problem, it was repeated across different formats, and supported by their internal case evidence.
That is so powerful.
The key takeaway for you listening is that a single expert interview with your lead partner, or just one deeply true core framework, can become a dozen different authority assets. You don't need 100 different disjointed ideas to be visible. You need one strong buyer-centric idea built into a connected architecture.
It's about consistency of meaning.
Yeah, every time a buyer encounters this firm, they learn to associate them with solving the Friday afternoon trap.
All right, let's assume a listener does this perfectly. They build the open kitchen. They extract a brilliant framework.
Yeah.
They construct this connected architecture of articles and videos. Their buyers are seeing the content, and they intellectually understand the firm's value. But to use a different metaphor, right now the buyer is just standing on the sidewalk watching the chefs cook.
Right, they haven't ordered yet.
Exactly. They are impressed, but they haven't walked through the door to order a meal. How do we actually transition them? When we connect this to the bigger picture, how do you get them to actively raise their hand without suddenly dropping the role of the trusted expert and, resorting to pushy, high-pressure sales tactics?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we really have to talk about deal mechanics and conversion paths. Because visibility and authority signals, no matter how brilliant they are, do not automatically close deals on their own.
They just don't.
No. We have to actively transition the buyer from passive consumption to active engagement. The sources outline a very common scenario, actually. A firm was incredibly active with targeted LinkedIn outreach. And they were executing the activity perfectly. They were getting attention, generating new connections, getting some polite replies.
Right.
But the commercial movement was stagnant because buyer confidence was still incredibly fragile. The buyers saw the firm's claims, but they hadn't internalized the firm's judgment.
Because an outreach message, even a really well-written one, is still just a signal. It's just a tap on the shoulder saying, hey, look at us. It doesn't actually solve anything for the buyer in that moment.
Exactly. The marketing activity was high, but the conversion mechanics were just missing entirely. To bridge this gap, the firm didn't just send more aggressive follow-up messages. They built a deliberate conversion path. And this path consisted of a webinar, a workbook, and most importantly, a diagnostic.
A diagnostic.
Yes, all centered around a very clear, urgent question on the buyer side.
I want to challenge the diagnostic approach for a second here. If I'm a busy executive, which is the exact type of buyer these firms are targeting, the absolute last thing I want is more homework.
Oh, for sure.
I don't want to fill out a 20-question survey that I know is just a disguised lead generation form for a sales rep to call me and pitch me. How do you design a diagnostic that a buyer actually wants to complete?
That is the exact right question to ask, because a poorly designed diagnostic is just a sales trap, and buyers smell it instantly. A bad diagnostic asks questions for the firm's benefit, like, what is your budget? Or, are you looking to hire a consultant this quarter?
Yeah, terrible.
But a brilliant diagnostic, the kind that actually builds authority, asks questions entirely for the buyer's benefit. It gives the buyer a new lens on their own problem. Instead of asking if they need help, it asks something like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if a data breach occurred at 4 p.m. on a Friday, how many minutes would it take your board to access legally defensible compliance logs?
Oh, that's incredibly sharp. Because as a buyer, I might read that question and realize, I don't actually know the answer to that. The question itself provides value by exposing a blind spot I didn't even know I had.
Exactly. That is the magic of it. By giving the buyer a well-crafted diagnostic to fill out, the firm offered immediate personalized value. The buyer is answering questions about their own organization's unique gaps and risks, using your proprietary framework to do it.
So they are doing the thinking with you.
Yes. This is what turns passive interest into active buyer engagement. They are no longer just reading an article about your thoughts, they are actively applying your expert judgment to their own reality.
And from the firm's perspective, this completely rewires the eventual sales conversation, doesn't it? Because when that executive finally books a call, you aren't starting from scratch trying to diagnose them on the fly.
It changes the entire power dynamic of the conversation. The buyer arrives with deep context. They have already experienced your judgment through the diagnostic tool. Diagnostics and structured discussion groups provide the buyer with a personalized lens on their problem, and they provide your firm with a right-fit conversation.
That's huge.
You are no longer trying to convince them that they have a problem. You are simply discussing the nuances of the problem they just diagnosed themselves using your intellectual property.
So what does this all mean for the listener who wants to actually implement this architecture tomorrow? We've covered the theory of the open kitchen, the connected architecture, and the conversion path. But I know there are landmines here. What are the most common pitfalls firms face when they start trying to build this authority in public?
This raises an important question because the default instinct for a firm when their growth stalls is almost always to simply do more of whatever they are already doing. The source material explicitly warns against two major traps. The first is the marketing activity trap. This is where a firm confuses pure activity, like the sheer volume of posts, the number of emails sent, or the amount of LinkedIn connections made with actual meaningful buyer movement.
To use a mechanical metaphor, it's the difference between a floodlight and a laser pointer, right?
Yeah.
Both might use the exact same amount of electrical energy, but the floodlight just scatters weak illumination everywhere, while the laser tightly focuses that energy to the point where it can cut through steel. Doing more of the wrong activity is just buying a bigger floodlight. It spreads confusion further and faster.
That is a perfect analogy. If your core messaging is broad, unfocused, and lacks a distinct point of view, blasting it out to 10,000 people instead of 1,000 just means you now have 10,000 people who don't quite understand what you actually do.
Yeah, that helps no one.
And that leads directly to the second pitfall, which is the sequence trap. This happens when a firm decides they need to grow, so they immediately start pushing for massive visibility. They buy ads, hire PR firms, start random podcasts, well, before they have established narrative clarity and validated their core frameworks.
Because visibility itself isn't a strategy, it's just a volume knob.
Precisely. Visibility is merely an amplifier. It only amplifies what is already there. If your internal narrative is unclear, if your proof is hidden and your frameworks are messy, increasing your visibility just means you are scaling your own ambiguity. You have to nail the narrative, extract the thinking, and build the architecture first.
Okay, so to avoid scaling ambiguity and to avoid just shining a floodlight of random content into the market, where exactly should a firm start? If a listener is sitting at their desk right now, what is the very first content format they should launch to get this connected system running the right way?
The advice here is incredibly practical. Do not start by sitting down, staring at a blank screen, and trying to write 50 random blog posts. That almost always fails.
Sterilizing.
It really is. Instead, start with formats that are specifically designed to extract and structure your firm's deepest thinking. The absolute best starting point is a single, deeply focused expert interview. Have a skilled interviewer sit down with the founder or the lead partner and interrogate them to extract the firm's core point of view on a specific, urgent buyer problem.
I can totally see why that works, because if you ask a brilliant consultant to write an article about their methodology, they'll just procrastinate for 6 months because they are perfectionists.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you sit them down and ask them, hey, tell me about the worst mistake you see clients making right before a crisis, they will talk for an hour straight and give you absolute gold.
Exactly. It bypasses the friction of content creation entirely. And once you have that recorded interview, that single, highly valuable asset can be spliced and repurposed. The transcript becomes the foundation for your authority architecture.
So you turn one conversation into a dozen pieces.
Yes, it can be turned into a series of articles. It can fuel your newsletter editions, and it provides the raw material for your case study assets. It ensures that all your subsequent content is rooted in a unified, authentic perspective, rather than whatever topic popped into a marketer's head that morning.
That is so smart.
The second highly recommended starting point is exactly what we just discussed, building a simple diagnostic or a targeted workbook.
Taking that extracted knowledge and immediately turning it into a tool for the buyer.
Yes. Build a short 5 to 10 question assessment that immediately ties your deep expertise to that clear, urgent buyer problem you identified in the interview. This serves as a powerful initial asset for your newsletters or as the core piece of your launch content.
Because it's useful immediately.
Right. It gives the buyer immediate personalized value, and it gives your firm incredible insight into the exact state of your pipeline.
It all comes back to showing the work, opening the kitchen, proving your judgment before asking the buyer to trust you with their business. This has been an incredibly enlightening deep dive. What we've explored today demonstrates exactly how the conceptual ideas we discuss translate into highly practical, concrete authority-building work.
Absolutely.
You don't have to guess what to post on LinkedIn tomorrow. There is a structure, a connected architecture that reliably turns your hidden internal expertise into a defensible market choice. But I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as we wrap up.
Let's hear it.
We live in a moment where artificial intelligence can instantly generate a perfectly worded, highly polished claim about absolutely any topic in seconds. Broad claims are no longer just cheap, they are entirely free.
That is so true.
If AI can generate the claim, then the actual messy, rigorously earned human process of how you think is going to be the only scarce commodity left in B2B consulting. If you aren't making your thinking visible, you are hiding your only remaining competitive advantage. Next time you are putting content out into the market, ask yourself, are you just taping a generic menu to the window? Or are you actually inviting the buyer into the kitchen to see how the meal is made? If you want to turn your expertise into something buyers can actually see, understand, and trust, take the Custom Authority Gap Prescription Quiz. It takes about 2 minutes, shows you where your authority gaps may be, and gives you the option to participate in a discussion group led by Derek Little, author of The Authority Gap. The Authority Gap is available on Amazon. To get the Authority Gap Reader Preview Kit, including the field guide and preview chapters, visit the book page at trailblazermastery.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.